Hello there, my name is Ian and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today, once again, I'm joined by Jonathan Cornell from Immersive Audio Album. Hello, Jonathan. Nice to see you.
Hey, Ian, glad to be here.
And today, we're going to talk about the new 2025 Atmos edition of Drums and Wires by XTC, expertly mixed by Steven Wilson as an update on his 2014 version, which we have here. And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit, I guess, about a little bit of the background of the album, because there's really not much to say. It is a very important album in their catalog, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But we're also going to talk about the history of this band in surround sound before we get into the new mixes proper. And one of the things that I think we really should kind of focus on is how different this new version is, or better it is than the prior edition, because I've had several people reach out to me and ask, hey, is this version different? Is it better? Should I get it? And I have definite opinions about that, as I'm sure that you do as well. But just to start, I guess we could talk about the prior editions before we get into, or I should say the prior surround mixes before we get into Drums and Wires proper. So I have all but one of them. And see if you can guess which one I don't have.
I've got the one you're missing, I think, in my stack.
Yeah, same here. And I have the one you're missing.
Nice.
But yeah, so this has been just a terrific series so far. And I think that it's probably gotten a lot of people into the band, sort of in the same way that when Steven Wilson revisited a lot of those Gentle Giant albums, it probably reached a wider audience. So I guess I'll just start by asking you, what are your thoughts in general on this surround series that Steven Wilson has done with XTC?
Well, as I've told you in other videos, a lot of the music that I've come to love were things that my dad bought either on vinyl or CD. And the only XTC album that he had on CD was Skylarking. And I think that's sort of indicative of the fact that that was probably their biggest album in the US, mostly on the strength of that song, Dear God, which was kind of like a bit of a cultural phenomenon at the time. But really my introduction to this band was through this series. I became a fan of Steven Wilson's mixing from his surround versions of like Aqualung and Songs from the Big Chair. And I remember the first one I bought was Nonesuch, which is, I think, the first one that was done in the series.
Yep.
And Nonesuch, as far as XTC albums go, I wouldn't exactly call it straightforward, but it's a little bit less quirky than some of the other ones. It's kind of a good entry point. And it still has some of my favorite songs that they've done. Like, I think The Disappointed is an incredible song. And the last track, Books Are Burning, I also think is one of their best songs. So I really liked this. So then the next one that was released after it was Drums and Wires.
And if you like that one, for sure, you're going to like, well,
let's say when I put it on, it was a shock.
Exactly.
Because it's different. It's
very different.
It's very kind of quirky and frenetic, fast paced. It's in some ways kind of the opposite of this.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I had a harder time getting into this one, but over time it grew on me. And I think it helps that the first couple songs are probably the most accessible, like Making Plans for Nigel or Day In, Day Out. And from there, I guess we may as well go through all of them. We've got Oranges and Lemons, which is kind of going back to the later period where they were experimenting more in the studio. This album, I would say it's certainly quirkier than Nonesuch, but again, like, I think this one grew on me pretty fast. King for a Day, I think, is a fantastic song. Across This Ant Heap is probably one of the, if you're talking about the surround mixes, one of the craziest songs on there. And from there, we got Skylarking, which, we've talked about. You've done a video on the new Atmos edition of Skylarking, so we don't really need to go back there. And then Black Sea, which came directly after Drums and Wires. And for me, I would say this is like, if I want to hear this period of XTC, this is the one I would go to.
I would agree with that.
I think there's a big leap in just like songwriting, recording, arrangement, everything from this out from Drums and Wires up to this album. And I'll be very excited when this one gets done in Atmos. And then we have, maybe from a surround POV, the best one of the series, which is the Dukes of Stratosphere Surroundabout Ride, which is kind of a 2.5 albums on one. Definitely 2 in 1 plus some bonus tracks.
Yeah, well, the first album was an EP, and it was released on April Fool's Day under the name just the Dukes of Stratosphere. And this was XTC pretending to be a classic psychedelic band, and kind of the conceit was, oh, this is the band where people like the Beach Boys, the Beatles, the 13th Floor Elevators, the Kinks, they stole everything from the Dukes of Stratosphere. That was the whole premise of the band. And then by the time, that was 25 o'clock. And by the time that Sonic Sunspot came out, which I think was after Skylarking, but you know, as we discussed today, the Chalk Hills resource is down. So if our facts are in any way inconsistent, that's why. But by the time that Sonic Sunspot came out, I think people knew that it was actually XTC, and it's more of like an album. And yeah, there are a couple of interesting extras included with this.
Yeah. The funny thing about this for me is it's sort of like you listen to each song, you kind of guess which band they're trying to emulate. Yeah. Like there's a song called Pale and Precious that's like very obviously supposed to be like a Brian Wilson kind of thing.
Reportedly, he heard it. Brian heard it. He just thought it was beautiful.
There's another song that's kind of like Doors-esque. There's another track that's kind of like Revolver era Beatles. It's a lot of fun. And, with all the tape loops moving around and stuff, it sounds incredible in surround. So probably in terms of like bang for your buck, you're getting the most content on this one as far as the others, though some of the other albums have bonus tracks mixed in 5/1, like Drums and Wires, which we'll get to. Yeah. And then we get to the last studio album that was done, which is The Big Express.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this one in a previous video. Maybe it was like we were talking about our favorite surround albums ever. And this is one of my favorite Atmos mixes. And it's the first XTC release that was done in Atmos. This was released in 2023.
And I went back and checked this out, just after you talked about it that one time. And I heard it maybe a week ago, and it is astonishing. There's a song on this, Rain of Blows, that I never cared much for it, but it hit the right spot for me the other night. So yeah, I would definitely agree that might be the best overall, just in terms of Atmos mixing. Although Skylarking, man, that's a tough one to top.
Well, I think people often say that the sort of career of XTC falls into these two sort of distinct periods, where there's one period where they were a live band and they made these more kind of stripped down records where they could perform them live. And then after they retired from touring, I want to say in like the early 80s, they started experimenting more in the studio. And I think this album kind of falls like right in the middle. It's sort of the transition between the two periods. I think they were finished touring by this point, but there's kind of a bit of the like quirky weirdness of Drums and Wires on this record, and also some of the more majestic studio kind of stuff of the later albums. Like there's a song on this album called This World Over that that could have been on Skylarking, I would say.
Oh yeah. And then like Rain of Blows could have been on Drums and Wires.
Or Black Sea, exactly. Black Sea.
But I don't know, because you've got the very pastoral Mummer album, which is right before that, which, I mean, come on, find those tapes, man. I think that's actually Steven Wilson's favorite XTC album, because that's the one that introduced him to the band. But Mummer is a very pastoral album that only just kind of suggests that older style. And I think infamously, right in the middle of making middle of recording the drum tracks for Love on a Farm Boy's Wages, Terry Chambers, the drummer, said, "I quit. I'm out of here, man. I can't do this. This is too weird." So I might point to Mummer as being kind of the transitional point, because after English Settlement, they still toured English Settlement a little bit. So they were still thinking about, can we reproduce this live? But I think even Andy Partridge and maybe Colin Moulding consider Mummer and Big Express to be sort of not the same record, but two sides of the same coin. With Mummer being kind of like Swindon's pastoral side, and Big Express being like the industrial side.
There's definitely kind of an industrial theme throughout the record, obviously as indicative by the cover. But I mean, there's even a difference between Black Sea and English Settlement. English Settlement is more of a studio creation than Black Sea is. Yes. So these are the studio albums that have been done in Surround thus far. And obviously, as we've talked about, there are some gaps like English Settlement and Mummer because they don't have the multi-track tapes for those albums. And the very early ones like White Music and Go To.
Yeah.
So we've started to see these reissues where they're being redone in Atmos. And it started with Skylarking last year. Which we talked a little bit about. And now the latest one is Drums and Wires, which has just come out a couple weeks ago. So that kind of takes us into the present. Now, I'm not sure like what the strategy is as far as like whether they intend to redo all the albums in Atmos or if they're selectively picking them. I mean, I think Skylarking was a good first choice because it's indicative in the Atmos mix that there was a lot of stuff buried even in the 5.1. It's very revealing because, you know, the album was produced by Todd Rundgren, so it's very lush and dense. But when they announced that Drums and Wires would be the next one, I was kind of like, huh? Like, is there really enough on this album to do an Atmos mix? Because it's a lot more stripped down than Skylarking. Yeah. But I think both of us were very surprised at what Steven was able to get out of it in this new mix.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great introduction. And the only thing that I would add is that the thing that's kind of characterized all of these XTC releases up until this point is this idea of a box set on a disc.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
You pay like between $20 and $30 for a CD and Blu-ray set. And on the Blu-ray, you get all of the new mixes. Plus, in many cases, you get demos, you get videos. Now, we have seen this issue where starting with Skylarking, they left a lot of those demos off.
Yes.
And that was something that I kind of tore my hair out about because I had already sold my old copy, thinking that all that stuff was going to be, I just assumed everything was going to be ported over. And luckily, I think they listened to us. I wouldn't say me. I'm not going to be that ego driven, but they listened to fans and they ported over most of the extra content that was on the original Blu-ray edition. So I wouldn't say sell your old copy of Drums and Wires. I definitely wouldn't say that, but there's enough overlap that if you don't have that, you're really not missing out on that much. And we're going to talk, I think, more and more as we go about, you know, what's different. But I thought I'd take just this opportunity to talk a little bit about the background of the album. There's not much to say other than this is the point in the band's history where the so-called classic lineup finally solidified. It's like all the players are in place. It's sort of like if you're a Genesis fan, this is like their nursery crime, where everybody's come together and now it's just, let's see where they go from here. And so of course, you know, Andy Partridge, who's singing and playing guitar, writing half of the material, Colin Moulding, who's singing, playing bass guitar, writing the other half of the material. In Barry Andrews, the original keyboard player, they actually did lose a third writer. But they replaced him with Dave Gregory, who was an interesting choice because Gregory grew up on like a lot of 60s blues records. So for a band who was trying to get away from that kind of 60s thing at this point and heading more towards the new wave or punk sound, it was kind of a really unique choice to bring in this guy who could really play, but also had an interest in a lot of older, you know, like British rock and blues music. And then of course, Terry Chambers, who I really think Terry's one of the greatest drummers of the era, up there with a Stuart Copeland for me, or like, and you know, like even like John Drumbo French from Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band. Like that's oftentimes what his drumming style reminds me of.
Sorry. It's funny you mentioned Stuart Copeland because didn't XTC open for the Police?
Yes.
In the early 80s or in the late 70s. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some obscure, or maybe it isn't obscure, I don't know. I'm not a huge Police fan, but I do really like them. But I know that there is a single where Stuart Copeland's wearing a Drums and Wires t-shirt, and we'll probably put an image of that in if I can find it. So yeah, the two bands were definitely related at this point. But just to comment on the drumming, My friend Derek, who was my guitar player for a lot of my projects, would characterize this drumming style as meathead drumming. And if you've heard it, you know what I mean. It's just like, like Flintstones drumming, like bam, 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 bam. Very simple, very direct.
On the next album on Black Sea, there's a song called Paper and Iron that's very indicative of that kind of style, where it's just like pounding. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even a song from this album, like Making Plans for Nigel, which is a very kind of straightforward beat that he's playing on the wrong drums. So the whole thing is just kind of shifted. He's very creative drummer. So, man, I could talk about the brilliance of Terry Chambers and go into a long chat about something like It's Only Africa, but we're not going to go there because we got to stay on topic
until we get English Settlement and Atmos, and then you can go there.
That's one of my favorites. That one and Oranges and Lemons, I think, are my absolute favorites. But so okay, yeah. Dave Gregory has joined the band. They're moving away kind of from that post-punk sound that characterized their first two records, but they're still very much there. And what's introduced on this record is an angularity, because you now have the dual guitar players, much like Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band would do. And that interlocking sound is a big part of this album and the next one too. So yeah, let's talk about this new Atmos mix.
How
do we feel about this?
I guess the $1 million question is, if you already own the 2014 5.1 mix, which was great, what are you getting here? And like, is this really better? So my impression of the original 5.1 mix is that kind of the core elements of the band, like the dueling guitars, the drums, lead vocals, were usually in the front. The drums were kind of mixed all around you on some of the songs. Most notably, I mean, the first thing you hear in the album, like you said, is the drums in Making Plans for Nigel, and they kind of slowly start in the back and march forward. And in the Atmos mix, it's done the same way. I was wondering like what was going to happen again. I was like, are the drums going to like start in the ceiling and go down? But it's the same way as in the 5.1 mix. So, and then kind of the rear channels are used for kind of these more atmospheric bits, like the harmony vocals, some like keyboards where applicable, like in Making Plans for Nigel in the second verse, there's like an odd kind of synth or keyboard part that you can hear very clearly in the surround mix that's quite low in the original stereo. Sometimes there's like extra percussion and things, but it's kind of like main band in the front, like sort of extra bits in the back, I would say. And it works well. Now in the Atmos mix, we're listening on different kinds of systems. You're on 512, I'm on 714. But I would say the Atmos mix, especially in 714, like really feels like you're in the middle of the band. So a lot of the things that were in the front in the 5.1 mix, like the dueling guitars, are now in the speakers that go in the sides. So you get this cool effect like on songs like Helicopter, where like the drumming is in front of you, and then you hear like Andy like sitting next to you on one side and Dave sitting on the other side, and the way the parts interact with each other. And then you have the rear surround speakers, which are kind of used for more of those things that were in the back in the 5.1 mix, like the harmony vocals. On a couple of the songs, there's a third guitar part, which is probably an overdub, like in Helicopter or in 10 Feet Tall, the main acoustic part. Sometimes that's mixed like directly behind you. So you get this effect with the two dueling guitars next to you, and then the third one is behind you. And then in the height speakers, one of the things that surprised me is there's quite a lot of layers to the background vocal parts in this album. Like, for example, in Making Plans for Nigel, like, there's the part where it's like, he must be happy. You can tell in the Atmos mix that there's different sets of harmonies. Like there's a Colin part that's double tracked that's in the back. And then there's another Andy part that's also double tracked that's placed above you in the Atmos speakers. And there are a lot of instances of that throughout the album where it's kind of like you thought maybe this was recorded on 2 tracks, but really it's like 4.
Right.
Because by the time this album was made in 1979, I would think they were recording on 24 track analog, probably. So there's a lot of latitude for placing different elements. And I think it's worth mentioning, of course, on the production side, this album was recorded and mixed by Hugh Padgham and produced by Steve Lillywhite.
Right.
And those two guys, like, their resumes are insane.
Yeah.
Hugh Padgham worked with Genesis and Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel, right?
But didn't work with them yet, which I think is significant.
Yes. So this is kind of earlier in.
Yeah. So Andy Partridge said that he was getting a little bit bored with the dry drum sound that characterized a lot of rock music in the 1970s. And somebody played him a Sushi and the Banshees album, and I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was, but the liner notes in the 2014 version indicate which one. And he was just obsessed with the huge drum sound. Like, that's what he was imagining for the next record, was just this big drum sound. And it's interesting that the techniques that were developed by Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham, they would go on to use that, in the next year on Peter Gabriel 3, and then also on Phil Collins solo albums. And that was the drum sound of the 80s. Like, that's what has always made these two albums really fascinating to me, is that this is like the beginnings of that.
Yeah, I mean, people typically say that there's the song Intruder on the Peter Gabriel album, which was kind of the birth of that sound. But I think you could kind of hear like a sort of, it's not quite the sound that you would come to know in the 80s, but kind of the genesis of it, if you will, is on these two albums. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And that's always been fascinating to me. Now, I do have a question for you. So on a song like Roads Girdle the Globe, where he talks about they brought in a bunch of record company people, and they're credited in the liner notes as the marijuana brass or something like that. But so when you have those group backing vocals, the marijuana brass backing vocals, are those in the ceiling, or where are those placed?
So they're in the rear ceiling speakers.
Nice.
Mainly.
Okay.
So I think kind of the main use of the top speakers in the Atmos mix is usually for the harmony vocals. There are some other interesting surprises, like in 10 Feet Tall, the guitar solos are in the Atmos height speakers. And then the other main thing they're used for is a lot of like the reverb. So you kind of get this effect where Terry Chambers' main drumming is sort of at ground level, and then the drums kind of fire their reverb into the height speakers. So it kind of feels like you're in the room where they were recorded.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, all this is to say, I think like there's a notable improvement here. Like it reveals more. I would also say that it's generally kind of warmer sounding. The cymbals are not as bright. There's a lot. The low end is a lot more punchy. I mean, you can crank the hell out of this, and it sounds fantastic. So yeah,
I would agree with that. Yeah, and I did yesterday. So here's my thoughts. So when I started the record, the first thing I noticed was that the bass was huge, and it took me a couple of listens for my ear to adjust to that, and I was going back and forth comparing it to the 2014 version, and the bass is there, but it's just not nearly as present. And I think I initially said to you, do you think the bass is a little bit loud? Because it's just so much louder than what I'm used to. And in time and kind of processing it over the past week or so, I realized that there's just more definition to every instrument in general, not just the bass. I would say that the bass and drums are the most pronounced, but then again, in reading the liner notes, that's what Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding were going for back then. Was a really like rhythm section heavy album. And I think I said to you a couple days ago that the drums sound like chocolate. They're sumptuous. And I was thinking about, the meme where the guy's with his girlfriend and he's looking at the other girl and he's making this, ooh. I must have made that face about 15 to 20 times throughout the course of listening. That's just going, ooh. Like just, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like you were in the studio with the band, and like the drums in a track like Millions just kind of kiss those top speakers. It's very delicately handled, but still a lot of power. And I also noticed, like, for instance, a lot of back channel stuff. See, I don't have sides. So like a lot of back channel stuff sounded like it was right at the back of my neck. Like when Andy's doing the seal bark vocals on Making Plans for Nigel, the ew or whatever he's doing, it sounds like it's right here. And another moment like 10 Feet Tall, with those acoustic guitars, it sounded like, I don't know who that was, if that was Gregory or Andy Partridge playing those parts, but it sounded like he was sitting right behind me. And I'm just not used to hearing this level of clarity and nuance out of what I never really thought of as much of a nuanced record to begin with. Like that's the thing. And I would go so far to say, as like somebody who's a big fan of this band, particularly starting from the next album forward, Black Sea Forward. Like I always thought this one, they were still kind of cooking and they hadn't quite fully formed yet. And although I'd always liked songs like Making Plans for Nigel, Helicopter, Roads Girdle the Globe, Scissor Man, Complicated Game, Reel by Reel, I liked like half of the album. I don't think I've ever appreciated it quite this much as I have over the past 3 or 4 listens I've had of this Atmos mix. And what greater compliment could I give to Steven Wilson's talents as a mixing engineer than to say that he made me like this album more than I ever have.
I mean, people often say the risk with mixing like this kind of, I mean, this isn't sort of straight ahead rock in the same way an album like, Who's Next would be. There's more kind of overdubs and layers than that. But people often say like mixing this kind of stripped down rock, like you risk sort of losing the glue between the instruments. And in the Atmos mix, the instruments are very separated, but they still have like a lot of power behind them. It doesn't lose the glue at all. In fact, I would say it sounds more powerful than the original stereo mix did. And the original stereo version of this album is not a bad mix. Like Hugh Padgham knew what he was doing. I think you could argue some of the other albums, like The Big Express, were not mixed particularly well in the original editions. But in this case, like the ones that Hugh did, like Black Sea and Drums and Wires, always sounded great. I have the original LPs of those records. But when you listen to this version, it's like, holy crap. Like, who knew all this sound was buried in there? Right?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And, we could talk about some standout tracks, but Roads Girdle the Globe is one that I have to mention because I remember that started out when I first heard this record as my least favorite song on this album. And now it's my favorite. And it's just because on the original, there was just so much dissonance and so many things clashing that I couldn't really tell what was going on. And it just kind of sounded like a mess to me. But hearing it all picked apart, and it's not like you say, it doesn't lose its glue, but to hear it all picked apart so I can hear all the component parts, it's become a highlight of the record for me. As has a song like Complicated Game, which I know isn't particularly a favorite of yours, but I've always loved it. That thing is a powerhouse. When Colin Moulding comes in like with that bass slide, it sounds like a Godzilla stomp.
The vocal echoes start flying all over the place.
I
would say another thing worth mentioning is there is a fair bit of like the sort of around the room moving, panning elements throughout the Atmos mix. In Making Plans for Nigel, there's the part where the vocals like sort of echo off each other towards the end, and it's one in each of the 4 height speakers. In Helicopter, the hi-hat moves around the top, which is a lot of fun. And then at the very end, when the song ends and everything drops out except for that thing, it circles like up as it's
that's neat.
It's like that's one of those moments you could literally like you could sort of close your eyes and you could see the object moving, in the Atmos session. I mean, a lot of like fun things whenever there's like a repeated backing vocal line, like 10 Feet Tall, the on and on and on, it bounces off the 4 speakers on the top. So again, like, we say this every time we review one of his mixes, but just the creativity of Steven Wilson. I mean, he's, I would say he's not the only person who's capable of doing a great Atmos mix. We've talked about other people on this channel like Bob Clearmountain or Bruce Sword, but I think he is one of the most creative, certainly when it comes to the way he has kind of the different elements of the music interact between the different areas of the surround fields. And it's just brilliant stuff. And I mean, like you said, this mix really raised my ranking of this album in the XTC canon.
It did for me as well. Now, I was listening very closely to it yesterday, and I was listening to it very loudly. And one thing that I noticed that's maybe a little underserved in the mix than I'd like it to be is the whisper vocals in Nigel. And I understand the approach of it, but I was wondering because it almost sounded like they were inside my head when I was listening. Like it wasn't like audible, but I could sort of feel them. And I was wondering, do those whisper vocals happen in the ceiling speakers, or where do they? Okay.
So for me, I've got 4 ceiling speakers. So they're kind of centrally placed in all of them. So they're basically directly above you.
And are they more? Would you say they're present?
I would say they're not any less present than they were in the 2014 mix, and they were just sort of placed directly behind you in the 5.1 mix.
Yeah, and I don't know if maybe I'm just used to hearing the original mix, but it seems like I remember those being much more prominent. But at the same time, I don't disagree with the choice because they're almost subliminal where they are right now. It's like if you really listen for them, you can hear them. But yeah, anyway, that was just a question I had. But and we can go back to lauding deserved praise for this recording. But one track we haven't talked about too much is Scissor Man.
Yes.
Which has this wonderful like cut up thing happening where it just kind of cuts itself apart and redistributes around the room. The part where Andy's going cutting. It's just that's just fantastic.
Or like that is the way, like the do this, do that. It swings back and forth between the height speakers. Another song that was like one I didn't really pay attention to, but it's one of my favorites on the record now is Outside World.
Yes.
I mean, as far as other songs go on the album, it's relatively straightforward. You know, main guitar placed behind you, the gang vocals during the chorus are in the height speakers. But I mean, that's kind of like, there's a quote from Colin Moulding, I think, in the 2014 edition in the liner notes, where he was like, that was kind of like the last gasp of like the punky version of XTC before they started to move more in this pop area. So I guess you could say this is kind of a transitionary album too, between what they were doing with the Barry Andrews albums and what was to come. There's a neat bit in When You're Near Me, I Have Difficulty, where like the Andy's like, I feel just like a jellyfish. It jumps up to the height speakers, the vocal. Cool. I mean, you know, we could do this all day, pointing out all the cool little things that happen in the Atmos mix. And I mentioned some of these in the written review I did about the album. So
yeah, which we'll of course link in the description as we always do. But yeah, we could go on. Like we didn't talk much about Reel by Reel, which is another classic tune. We didn't talk much about Day In, Day Out, where we've got the day in, day out.
Yep.
It's another example of that. But I did want to talk a little bit about the additional tracks, because I think I'd mentioned to you on Messenger that this is like a tall box embarrassment of riches bonus track selection. And we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bonus tracks on the 2014 version. I think we have 10 on the new Atmos.
So the only one that's missing, as you mentioned before we started, is Life Begins at the Hop, which was a Pentio up mix on the original 2014 edition. And on this version, I guess they just like decided not to include it because they didn't have the tapes for it. I don't know. I think like they may as well have just put the Pentio 5.1 from 2014. I guess I could understand not wanting to do an Atmos Pentio on top of that, but that was kind of a weird omission.
It is, yeah, because it's an important track for them, and I think it was kind of their first big single, and it predated even Making Plans for Nigel. And the track that's right after it, Homo Safari, I believe was the B-side to Life Begins at the Hop. So it is a kind of, it's an omission, and it might be on the CD. So maybe that's what they were thinking. I didn't look at the CD, but I think that the CD is basically just the first disc of this version again. I don't think there's any change there. So it is on the collection, and it might be in the additional materials in stereo as well. But yeah, I do think that is a glaring omission, but there's also some really interesting things in the extras. And I guess we do get 11 bonus tracks, because One of the things we get is what's the song? That Is the Way, and it's at the proper pitch.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
And Officer Blue is the other song where they put it at the original pitch that it was recorded.
Right.
But for me, I would say the standout of the bonus tracks is Chain of Command. I think that's a great tune. It's a lot of fun in Atmos with the vocals that go like they sort of bounce around the speakers on top.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. Limelight gets stuck in my head like crazy. That just like, it's like a 3 o'clock in the morning earworm. Like, why am I thinking of this song? You know, I'm in love with myself on a loop. I'm very fond of Homo Safari. It's almost a direct homage to the Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band. And what's really fun about listening to that is that I can almost imagine what a Steven Wilson remix of Trout Mask Replica, or even something like Dock at the Radar Station, would sound like. But yeah, that's like a couple of comments in general about these extras. Like, they seem to be songs that are maybe, on one end, they're like almost too poppy for the album. And then on the other hand, they're too experimental for the album. So that makes it so interesting. And the other observation I have is that sort of in a Dukes of Stratuspherian sort of way, these songs remind me of other bands. Whereas a lot of the tracks that are on the main album remind me only of XTC. Take, for instance, the song, I want to say the song Bushman President is kind of similar to a Kraftwerk tune called Neon Lights, if I'm thinking about the right one. And then Pulsing is like somewhere between a Captain Beefheart and a Residence thing. Like I could see that fitting on the commercial album. And again, it's like I said, like these are way too experimental reference points for where the band wanted to be at the point. So it makes sense that these would be delegated to B-sides and unreleased tracks, but they're still super fascinating to hear. Wait Till Your Boat Goes Down is kind of like a funky thing.
Again, those huge gang vocals in the chorus, right?
Yeah.
And the electric version of 10 Feet Tall is kind of neat. I mean, I prefer the album version, but
me too.
It's a cool alternative way to hear it, and it also works.
And what's, I think, most interesting to me about it is that it's a different recording to my ears.
Oh yeah, it's not like they just took the regular vocal and like replaced all the instruments. It's a different performance.
Yeah. And it's got different sections of the song, and it's kind of like how there's two versions of the Tears for Fears song Mother's Talk. There's two very, very different versions of it. And even though I've had the other version for 11 years or whatever, somehow this escaped me. Like I hadn't heard it before. So it was really exciting to hear it in the Atmos mix.
Well, I was just looking back to try to figure out if this was the one in the series that had the most bonus tracks, and I think it is.
I think you're right.
Skylar, Black Sea also has a bunch of extra songs, but not as many as this. So I guess this was just a very kind of productive period for them, being in the studio. And yeah.
Well, they suggested in the liner notes that at this point in their careers, they weren't sure if they were ever going to be allowed to make an album again. So I think that it was like, let's take advantage of the time and opportunity we have to put everything down. And I dig it. That's a very like tall mentality. Let's get everything down, as best we can. But yeah, Officer Blue, I think you mentioned that's at the proper, pitch, but that's another one that's just a joy in Atmos for like the middle section where it goes really experimental. And I was listening to that. I was actually sitting in this chair as opposed to the couch, which I can hear the back speakers a little bit better. And that stuff was just flying all over the room. You could, I wouldn't really be upset if maybe Steven didn't put that much effort into the extras. If he like put all of his effort into the main album and just kind of positioned things for the extras, he kind of does that sometimes with like the Broadsword outtakes for Jethro Tull. A lot of times they're just kind of placed. But I was enjoying the fact that he was having a little fun, even with the extras. So, that's great. Like I can recommend this whole set. And I love the fact that with the main album and the extras, we almost have a double album now. Of Drums and Wires, which is incredible.
I mean, like I was telling you, really my only beef with this reissue is that it doesn't have the same booklet as the 2014 one.
Yes.
Because the booklets of the original, the main run, like in this style packaging, the clamshell, they have these very detailed liner notes with like a long introduction essay from Andy, and they have notes on each song from Andy, Colin, and Dave, which are like really interesting to read, especially because Andy Partridge is kind of like a very witty person. Like his writing is very fun too, when he talks about, you know, what was going on at the times that they made these albums. So it is a little annoying that they couldn't just put the same booklet from the original version in the new one. But to your point, they did like listen to people's, I don't want to say outrage, but perhaps dismay about leaving the extra material off of Skylarking. Yeah. However, one thing that was on Skylarking that isn't on this edition is there was an instrumental Atmos mix of the Skylarking album on the Atmos edition, and there isn't one on the Drums and Wires.
Yeah, I guess they had to make room for it.
Yeah, but for quite a dense album like Skylarking, it was interesting to hear it mixed in surround without the vocals. So I guess it would have been cool if they could throw that in here, but there are space limitations on a Blu-ray disc, and there's a lot of material on here. Yeah. So yeah,
I would concur. I mean, I guess this is kind of like our criticism section. I would concur that the booklet is a serious drawback, and it's probably the main reason why I'm hanging on to my old copy of it. Because the booklet provided invaluable research reading for the making of this video. Now, just talking about other inconsistencies, the videos are missing from the new version.
Yes.
So if you want decent transfers of like the Making Plans for Nigel video and a few other songs, a few other singles, you're going to want to hang on to that old version. And then also, of course, if you want to hear Officer Blue mixed in surround at the old pitch, you want to hold on to the old one. And then there's the Life Begins at the Hop up mix, which is exclusive to the older version. So yeah, if you're a hardcore fan, don't sell your old version. Don't think, well, I'm going to sell my old version and get the new one. No, I wouldn't. I'd hang on to it.
But you know, at the same time, we are kind of nitpicky about these things.
Yeah.
But sure. Like I'm glad this is like an inexpensive, you know, easy to pick up reissue. They could have said like, we're doing a huge box set of the whole XTC catalog that's like $200 that has all the albums in it, and that could have been the only way to get the Atmos mixes. So I'm glad they're doing it in a way that makes it relatively easy to replace them if you wanted to. Like these reissues are not ones that break the bank, which is something we often complain about for some other bands. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And as you famously have said, long may they continue. I hope that next year we're looking at Oranges and Lemons.
Well, I was going to say, if you could choose, which one would you want next?
Well, okay, let me think. So if we're going to do one that's already been done, then Oranges and Lemons would be my next choice. If we're going to do one that hasn't been done, if possible, English Settlement would be my next. And I would say equally Mummer, which I don't know what the situation is on Mummer, but the thing about Mummer is that it already sounds pretty good. So I don't know how necessary a new mix of that would be. It's one of the best sounding albums, but
just people often say that about some of the albums that Steven has remixed, you know, like Who's Next or Moondance or
Songs from the Wood,
ABC Lexicon of Love. Like those albums do already sound great, but the draw of him working on them to me is that they're being mixed in surround.
Right.
So it's not really a question of whether there's going to be a new stereo version that sounds better than the old one. Like I want to hear it in Atmos.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. And I think as far as the other albums go, they have like bits and pieces of them. Like they have a couple tracks from English Settlement. They have maybe like half of Mummer. And I wonder if at some point, like if they decide like these tapes are really gone, they'll do like some kind of like a 3-piece suite. Like these are the songs that we have. Now, when I interviewed Steven, I asked him this question, because people have been saying for years, like, why don't they just put out whatever's left? And he made a good point, which is that because the albums are so different from each other, like there's such a change from So basically the albums that they have incomplete tracks for are White Music, Go To, English Settlement, and Mummer. Like all those albums sound nothing like each other. So you can't really make a compilation from those songs. Like they don't flow together in the same way the first three Gentle Giant albums kind of flow together as one thing. So I could understand why they would be hesitant to do that, but I think at some point, like if it becomes apparent they really are not going to find any more tapes, I would like to hear Atmos mixes of whatever they have.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, you know, Andy and Steven and whoever else is involved in these reissues, they're trying to figure out whatever the best way to present those songs is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had heard that basically what was missing from English Settlement were the singles, which sucks because those are some of the most important songs of the band's career. Like,
Senses Working Overtime.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And, you know, and not to mention like Ball and Chain is another single that they had back then, English Roundabout. But those have got to be like on some compilation reel somewhere, or maybe some record label has it or something. But yeah, so what would your choice be for the next Atmos?
Well, I mean, when Skylarky came out, I would have said for sure my next choice is Oranges and Lemons. Because Oranges and Lemons, it's one of those albums for me, like if it was a single, it would be my favorite XTC album. I think it's very long. Like they kind of start to lose me around that fourth side, but it has some of my, you know, all-time favorite XTC songs on it. And it would be perfect for Atmos because that might be their most ambitiously layered record. Maybe you could argue the Big Express has more going on than Oranges and Lemons. Maybe they're about equal. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's tough to say.
But now, like after hearing what could be done with something as relatively sparse as Drums and Wires, I think Black Sea would be really cool.
Yeah.
And then of course, like the Dukes of Stratosphere would just be insane in Atmos. I mean, it's insane enough in 5.1. So
yeah. So good talking with you today, Jonathan, as always. I want to encourage anybody who's watching this, let me know in the comments if you've had a chance to hear this, what your thoughts are. Also, let us know if you're like really into this series like we are. Let us know what your next pick for an XTC and Atmos would be, or just multi-channel in general. Let us know in the comments. Don't forget also to subscribe to the channel. And, you know, and I don't stress this enough, but also subscribe to Immersive Audio Albums channel, which will be linked in the description. I think up next, we may be talking about these. This is, of course, 2 King Crimson records that have come out within the past week, Lizard and In the Wake of Poseidon. But these have excellent new mixes from Steven Wilson. And I am so excited to talk about them because much like you were saying with Drums and Wires, if I could make a general comment about these albums when Steven Wilson goes back and redoes them for Atmos, that in general, I believe that he is heading for warmer tones. And I think he's also getting them closer to the original mixes in a lot of ways, which is just making these a revelation for me. So if you want to hear us talk about these, as well as a couple other releases like The Doors, we're going to be talking about that really soon. The only way to keep tabs on the channel's activity is by subscribing. So yeah, please do. We'd very much appreciate it. But until then, Jonathan, thanks again for joining me. This has been a lot of fun as always, and looking forward to the next one. And yeah, we'll see you all again real soon. So take care.
See you next time.